Hi there. I'm glad you're here. Welcome to Beyond the Frame. I'm your host, Ryan Vanderhei, and I've learned some of my most valuable life lessons from my favorite TV shows and movies. Sure, these works of art entertain us, offer us an escape, and even tap into our emotions. But there's one E that's often overlooked, Joe.
We're not going to overlook that, and that's educational. If viewed from a different perspective, these stories and their characters can help us to learn and develop as human beings. I'm your co-host, Joe Parente, and it's our mission with this podcast to share these unique perspectives so that you can grow from the show.
The topic of today's discussion, the 2024 Oscar-nominated Latvian animated film Flow, and tragedy's ability to bring people together. As always, there will be spoilers ahead, so please proceed with caution and be sure to leave a like, rating, or review wherever it is that you listen, as it really helps the show. Shall we begin?
We shall.
Let's do it.
The answers that you're looking for are lying just beyond the frame.
First, before we dive in here, I just want to acknowledge how special this film is and what they were able to accomplish with zero human characters and zero dialogue other than the sounds that the animals were making.
Yeah, fantastic.
The expression on the animals' faces, the texture of the animation, the score, everything combined to amplify this wonderful story about survival and about coming together when times get tough. Or rather, putting aside your differences to overcome something much larger in scale. Yes, this is a story about animals surviving in the wild, but it's extremely relatable to human beings. I mean, we see it all the time, right? Tragedy just has a way of bringing people together. You know, you have to combine forces to overcome this larger thing that's posing a threat.
Yeah.
And I thought of some examples of, either that I've heard or I've witnessed in my own life. But I'm curious, Joe, are there any tragedies that you've lived through in your own experience? And in that, do you think that it brought people together?
Personally, I'm grateful that I haven't lived through a tragedy. I mean, I've known many people who've passed away, but I think we are talking about something different here. So,
Yeah, like natural disaster.
right. So the
or something
closest thing to that, and again, I was 3,000 miles away, was 9/11.
Okay.
But the reason I bring this up is because I was living in San Francisco at the time, and a friend of mine called me up and woke me up and said, "Turn on the TV, turn it on. There it is. Wow." I got to see the second tower go down live, which was really surreal. That day and the next few days, people didn't go to work. And, at that time, there wasn't really telecommuting back then, 2001.
Sure.
And so just walking out on the streets of San Francisco, as I did every day anyway, people were stopping and talking to each other. And it was fascinating. It's like everything slowed down. And it was really lovely. And people were out on the street, it seemed like, to talk to each other, to encounter people. And usually, not that San Francisco is a huge city, but people are in a hurry and people are doing their thing, and it's a city. They're not like all waving to each other like, "Hey, neighbor," but they were that, particularly that night when I went for a walk around Pacific Heights near where I lived. There were so many people out, and everyone was walking pretty slowly, and it was beautiful, and we were really friendly and talking, and it was horrible what was happening and what brought us together, but it did bring us together.
That's interesting that you bring that up. I'm glad that you did. That's, an example of a tragedy that you lived through here in America, and it's after that took place, you were just an American.
Yeah.
And so you were
for
with
a time
your fellow Americans.
Yeah, it was very
The person
true.
down the street or the neighbor
That's
or
right.
this or whatever, your
That's
boss.
right.
You all shared this commonality suddenly. It's always been there, but suddenly it became front of perspective.
Yeah. For sure.
And you're like you said, it just brought people together. I was alive when that happened too. I was much younger, but yeah, I remember everybody in school kind of like joining together, kind of like all of us being like a family, like concerned with one another and making sure everyone got back home to their families and to this and to
There
that.
we
And
go.
everyone was helping everybody. And again, that tragedy had a way of bringing people together. That's the good that can come of a tragedy, right? It's like, unfortunately, that is something, that's the fortunate part.
It is.
It's not worth the tragedy occurring in the first place, but
No.
you hope that when a tragedy does occur, that people can come together. And I think that's
You
what
do
this
hope that.
movie
Yeah.
illustrates with us. I mean, we see it with hurricanes, we see it with the wildfires, which is what I'm going to talk about. We see people kind of come together to this common thing, this goal that they're experiencing.
Wouldn't it be great if we did that without tragedies? Anyway.
Exactly. Why does it take a tragedy now
I know.
force us into that? It's unfortunate. But as you said, I've been super lucky enough in my life to not have lived through something catastrophic like what happens in this film.
Yeah.
Like a large flood or anything like that, anything of that scale to what you would qualify as a tragedy. But a close friend of mine told me a story of their experience that I think illustrates this theme pretty spot on, and that's dealing with the recent wildfires that we had here in LA.
Okay.
And this friend of mine ended up being evacuated from their home, just like you did. And they were close to the Eaton fire.
Okay.
On the east side. And they described how it all happened to me, the evening that it all took place. They get the alert on the phone, wakes them up 3-4 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, never having been in this situation before, you don't know what to do. I don't know. So they went downstairs and looked outside. What are the neighbors doing? Right? Are the neighbors, is everybody getting in their cars and going? Then I should, you look for some sort of sign.
Of course. Sure.
And so they open the front door, and the neighbor across the street is doing the same thing. And so the neighbor across the street starts flicking his porch lights on and off. And so this friend of mine does the same. And so he walks across the street to him. Now, this is a neighbor he hasn't done more than wave to in 5 years.
Wow. Okay.
It's specific. He'd never spoken a word to this person. It's just a friendly, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the extent of their relationship.
Okay.
Now he's at this man's porch. They're talking. What are you thinking? They're going over their plan and such. And
wow.
Soon, the rest of the neighborhood is all coming over. So the neighbors on the left, the neighbors on the right. So everybody's coming to join and sort of go over their plan together. They're looking out for each other. What do you need? What do you got? Oh, you've got the kids. Yeah, you got to get the car, whatever. They're all kind of like forming this plan together so that they can all get out and be safe, right?
Wow.
These are all people who don't talk to each other.
Right.
That's just everybody kind of keeps to their own.
Yeah.
LA kind of has that way about it. Everybody kind of sometimes
cities do.
Keeps to their own,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I certainly I don't know any of my neighbors in this building. None of them. I've maybe waved or seen them in the hall and smiled. That's the extent. And so this tragedy takes place, and it brings all these people together. And for the first time in 5-6 years, they're all having a conversation with one another, and they're all concerned with making sure everybody is okay, that everybody's going to get out safely, including the direct neighbor to this friend was an elderly woman, and she hadn't come out.
Oh, okay.
And so everybody decided my friend would go over, knock until she answered, and she didn't know what was going on when she answered the door.
Wow. Okay.
So it's just that sentiment of like nobody left behind.
Yeah.
And instead of what previously you're just looking out for yourself, you're just living your life. You got your neighbors there, but they just exist. You exist.
Yep.
But now it's about, well, there's an elderly woman that lives there, and she's not going to hear the alarm, or we should make sure that she's awake and aware of what's going on, so she can get out.
So, 2 questions.
Okay.
Did their homes burn?
No.
Do they still talk to each other?
That's a good question.
I'm curious.
I'm curious.
You
Yeah,
might have to
I don't
follow up
know.
with your
I
friend.
might have to follow up and see
Yeah.
if they still keep in touch, because there would be a familiarity now
Absolutely.
afterwards
Absolutely.
when you go back home, right? Thankfully,
You would hope
nobody's.
so.
They were in the evacuation zone. Nothing ended up. The flyer didn't end up breaching them. Thankfully.
Yeah, you would hope so. Yeah.
But yeah, if you go back home, I mean, now it's a different relationship has changed.
Hopefully. Yeah.
There's a familiarity there now. So yeah, I might have to follow up. That's a
Yeah.
great question. So now let's get to our movie here
Yeah.
and why we talked about all that stuff in the first place. So Flo begins with a precious young cat living in sort of a cat sanctuary, I would call it, in the middle of the forest. The cat spends its days wandering around, trying to find something to eat, interacting with the other animals, including some dogs. The dogs chase after the cat, as dogs do. And we can see that everything that happens is pretty much all about survival. You know, eat, stay away from the big animal, scary animal that's going to eat you. You know, it's a dog-eat-dog world out there.
So
No
to
pun
speak.
intended. At the end of the days, the cat goes back to this sort of sanctuary, climbs up the side of a house, and sleeps peacefully on a bed in the attic. All is right in the world. That is, until one day when a massive flood destroys the area, and the cat is forced to team up with other animals in order to survive as they all float down the abyss on a beat-up fishing boat.
Excellent synopsis. Can I point out one thing that happened really early on in the movie?
Please.
At the cat sanctuary?
Yes.
Did you catch the boat in the tree?
The boat in the tree, no.
There was a boat in the tree really early on in the movie. I'm like, what is a boat doing up in a tree?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Well,
Okay.
that comes back later on
It
in the
sure
film,
does.
so that's
It sure
interesting. I
does.
didn't catch that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you caught that.
Because
brought
I was
that up.
like, what is that doing there? Okay.
So let's get into our first scene here that illustrates this theme we're talking about, shall we? So the first thing I want to talk about is the bird sticking up for the cat.
Yeah.
Oh, God, hurts the heart. Again, coming back to what I said at the beginning, the way they're able to like make you feel emotion for these characters, even though they speak no words and they're not human, it's fascinating.
It's fascinating because also the artists who did this did not attempt to anthropomorphize the animals and give them human characteristics.
Sure, yeah.
And so to me, what made this especially effective was this is dogs acting like dogs, a cat acting like a cat. They were acting like the animals they were.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you animate, when do you see that? When you animate characters that are animals, you're going to anthropomorphize them. You're going to make them
course.
human.
Of course.
And this didn't do that.
No, we had a cat was a cat, a capybara was a capybara.
Yeah.
The birds were the birds. I mean, everybody was themselves. They were grounded in what they actually were and how they actually acted. I love this is not a scene I chose to discuss, but the mirror breaks and then the monkey's messing around with it and the cat's like seeing I mean, that's just so good.
So
I
good.
mean, that is a cat in a nutshell.
So good.
So I agree with what you said there. That's a good point to point out. So at this point in the film, the flood has happened. The cat has jumped on the boat with the capybara, and they've picked up a monkey along the way. All throughout this time, the cat has had to duck and avoid and dodge these large birds that are flying around and thriving during this tragedy. The cat tries to go after some food and, obviously is very hungry. It hasn't eaten in days at this point, but it has to run away from the birds and ends up without food once again. I mean, this poor cat, I kept saying that to my mom as we were watching it. And I kept like, this cat's got to eat at some point. It's got to be starving. And so suddenly, one of the birds approaches with a fish in its mouth, and it drops it at the feet of the cat, sort of as a gesture.
Yep.
Right? You
Yep.
need food, here's food.
Yep.
The other birds, however, in the flock,
They were having none of it.
they don't seem to like this too much.
Nope.
And the leader of the flock, if you will call, this bird that approaches, steals back the fish, and passes it to one of the younger birds. It's kind of, we feed our own here. We're not.
Oh,
this
that
isn't
was
charity work.
absolutely true. That was quite clear.
Yeah, very clear.
Yeah.
The flock corners the cat, and the bird who brought the fish to him initially stands up against the flock, against their own flock.
And literally puts its body to block the cat.
Yeah, to protect it.
Yeah, to protect it.
She and this lead bird, if you will call it that, fight, as in nature often takes place. You got to take out the one at the top.
Establish alpha and all
Right,
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
All that good stuff. She loses. She loses the bird that was trying to protect the cat. And so as a, I guess, consequence to this, all the birds gather and they destroy her wing and subsequently her ability to fly, because she tries to fly away, he or she.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen.
Yep.
So the bird then joins the cat and the other animals on the boat. In this scene, the bird saw beyond survival instincts and this programming that they had to help a fellow animal that was down and out. They saw someone in need and they decided to help them, going against what was in their very nature.
Very true. It was, I really enjoyed that scene because it wasn't like this whole movie. It wasn't sentimental.
Right.
It seemed just like you're hungry. There are fish everywhere. We got to see that. It's not as though there was a scarcity of fish, and that's why the bird was saying, "Hey, don't feed the cat," because there aren't enough, fish to go around. There was a ton of fish to go around.
Yeah.
But it was just making a point of, that's not our species. That's not our kind. You don't do that. I think that for, people who observe, biologists, whoever observes animals over a long period of time, and I've heard this before, I've come across this, they do see out there in the wild gestures of kindness, if you will, gestures of compassion. It's not something that only humans are capable of.
Sure.
Across species.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was also no resentment from the bird, and that's where, again, it wasn't anthropomorphized. It's like, I stuck up for you. I tried to feed you. I lost this battle. I'm not going to hold it against you. You know what I mean?
It's back to survive.
It's like, just back
I'm
to
on the
doing what
boat
we're
and it's
doing.
time to survive again.
And I really liked that. To me, that smacked of reality, if you could call it that.
Yeah.
But I mean, that almost, we don't support those that we don't know. Ryan and I just did an episode on American History X, and one of the points was, if we don't know them, we don't want to know them, and if we don't know them, they're the enemy.
Sure.
And
same sentiment.
There was right. That's going on here too. They're not one of us. Don't feed them. Don't try to protect them.
Yeah. Why are you helping the cat out? That's not our people.
Right.
That's not our flock.
Right.
The birds of a feather stick together, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And the bird was injured, as a result of that.
Yeah. And there wasn't any kind of, like you said, resentment. It did not humanize this.
Not at all.
Bird. It was right back to.
And then what happens in the boat too, though? I don't know if I'm getting ahead of
we
you
might
or
get
whatever. Okay.
Let's save some space here. We might get to that later on.
Okay.
But before we do, let's do a bad guy break.
Why not? Great time for it.
This one was a bit tricky, but I wanted to kind of just stick with this sort of sentiment of kind of not caring about people that are outside yourself.
Okay.
So
All right.
just keep that in mind.
Okay.
As we do this bad guy break here. So, as always, 4 hints to guess this popular fictional antagonist. The year that this film came out, 1985. This genre, sci-fi comedy adventure, sorry.
Okay.
The setting, 1955 California. And the actor who plays this character is Mr. Tom Wilson.
You know, you got me, Tom Wilson. Sorry, Tom. I hardly knew you.
I wouldn't know it if I saw it either.
Okay.
Sorry, Tom.
You stumped me completely.
Love you. You were great in this. But so 3, 2, 1. Biff Tannen
Well, I was going to say Back to the Future.
from Back to the Future.
Oh, okay, that's the only movie that I had in my head was Back to the Future.
Well,
but you
you
threw
had
me
it
off
right.
so much
With
Tom Wilson.
Sorry, Tom.
No, it's okay. That's funny.
Biff,
That's funny.
Tom, Biff, you were great. So Biff is a bully, and he punches down on people who are beneath him. I mean, that's
fair
just
enough. That's a good bad guy.
that's the
break.
sentiment. So, well, you technically got it.
I mean,
I'm gonna
that's
give
the
you
only
that.
movie I had in my head was,
Yeah,
was
I'll
Back
give
to
you
the
that,
Future. But
for sure.
Tom, you threw me.
So let's get back to flow, huh? So the second scene I want to explore is when the lemur and cat go back to save the other animals after the flood is over. So this is towards the end of the film. The flood has ended. Everything's kind of getting restored back to the way it was. The cat and lemur both team up and head back to the boat, which is now stuck in a tree.
Yeah.
As you said, was in the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to just go back and watch that. See if I
Really
can find
early
it.
on.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating. It's like Chekhov's gun, except it's like
Yeah. It's
a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So the lemur and cat team up and head back to this boat to help the other animals because the capybara and the dogs are still in it and they're stuck in the tree. The dogs manage to jump out, and then it's just the capybara that's left inside. Well, they start tugging at the ropes and trying to help out, and then a rabbit runs by. Well, if you know anything about dogs, that rabbit's getting chased down, boy. That is good luck. And all of the dogs, except for one, run off, and that's the golden lab. I'm calling it. I don't know if that's exactly what it was, but
I think it was.
Yeah.
Bloody lovable too.
he was great.
You know.
He, she, whoever.
Yeah.
And runs off. Everybody runs off to chase the rabbit. He stays back and ignores his or her instincts to help the cat and the lemur to save the capybara. The dog realized that there was something more important, more pressing than chasing after this bunny for food. There was someone in need, someone who had helped them previously. And they chose to fight the urge to stay and help, which was a very noble decision.
It was noble. Well, and the capybara had become part of its pack,
Yeah, exactly.
you know?
Dogs are pack animals.
Absolutely. And to your earlier point, they'd been through a lot together, like a tragedy together.
yeah.
What planet that was on, I don't know, but it was beautiful.
Yeah.
And that flood was rather extreme, but that was a beautiful thing to watch. And I think it was all the more poignant, as you pointed out, to watch all the other dogs run off.
Yeah.
And for this dog to just kind of be like, well, wait, what should I,
Yeah.
because it wasn't just jumping right on it. He had to think about it.
Yeah, the instinct kicked in.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
could
for
tell.
sure. Oh, for
But
sure.
but there was like a pause,
yeah.
and then it took a second, and then it turned back to which I thought was great. It turned back to help out there. Obviously, like I liked it. You used that word, the pack.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these animals had come together to survive this extreme circumstance, this bizarre catastrophe, and they needed each other.
They did.
I mean, there's a scene, I didn't choose it in here to talk about, but when the cat goes fishing, and instead of getting one fish or two fish for itself,
That's right. It gets several.
it goes,
Yep.
and you got to. It's tired at this point.
Yep.
It's been through heck and back.
This is a cat swimming for fish.
Yeah, cats do
In
not
the
like water. They do not like
And
water.
that was very clear at the beginning of this movie. This
It's
cat was
avoiding water
not
at
happy
all
about
costs.
a flood.
right.
And then, halfway into the movie, this thing's swimming.
Yeah,
And it's going for food.
it's doing what it has to do.
It's doing what it has to do. And that cat is not resisting water anymore. I loved watching that. I loved seeing that cat get to the point where it's like, hey, yeah, if I need to swim, I'll swim.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Survival.
Yeah.
And then just that decision to not, it could have, again, it could have gotten one fish
Yeah.
fed itself and been good.
Yep, that's
But
true.
it dove back down. I mean, maybe 15, 20 times.
Several times.
And got all those fish
Yeah.
so that everybody on the boat was fed.
It didn't work out that way.
It didn't
but that
work
was
out
the
that
intention.
way. The
it seems.
dogs jumped on and
One dog in particular.
hoovered up
Was
the
a complete
entire-
dog about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the entire thing.
Hoovered. Good way to put
Hoovered
it.
it. Why don't we learn a fun fact
Please.
about this film, shall we?
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
So I loved this. There was a lot of good IMDb sort of tidbits, but
Yeah.
I thought that this one was the funniest. So the team behind Flow wanted to have all the sounds that were made by the animals to be authentic. You want it to sound real, right? In order to achieve
Yeah.
this feat, they recorded real animals. Makes sense to me.
Yep. No human sounds.
No human sounds, all real animals.
Mm-hmm.
For the capybara in particular, a sound engineer went to a zoo and tickled one of the capybaras
I read this too. I love it.
to get the recording of what it sounded like. What was even funnier is that when they were cutting the film, the sounds didn't match the personality of the capybara. It was probably too playful, and we saw like the capybara was very like resolute.
Yeah.
It was very like zen.
It was more sloth-like. I thought,
Exactly.
you
Right.
know?
So you can imagine, tickling sounds like whatever it was making probably wouldn't match that too well.
Yeah.
And so what do you use instead? A baby camel.
That's awesome.
I mean, that
I
makes
love
sense,
that.
right? I just thought that was hilarious. I
Yeah.
can just imagine the fun you would have in terms of like record, like that's your day of work.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, we gotta go
Right.
record the cats, or like whatever it is,
Oh my
lemurs.
God.
I don't know how you get that. I mean, you got to go out in the forest.
It totally. I wonder if this is confusing for people who know what a baby camel sounds like.
Sure, maybe it threw you off. Like that's not a
That is
capybara.
not
I
a
know
cap-
that sound.
Exactly.
Some zoologist somewhere.
Yeah, that was a good fun fact.
So our third and our final scene that we're going to discuss
Yeah.
is the ending, which, boy, was just well done.
Sure was.
So it's worth noting, for context, earlier in the film, the animals had their boat get caught on something that none of them could get free. They were trying to figure it out, and they just couldn't get it free, and it was looking pretty dire there for a second. Looked like all hope was gone until a large whale came by, which I thought was a dinosaur at first. It
Me
had
too.
It had these like spikes coming out of it. I was
Yeah,
going,
me
what the
too.
heck movie am I watching? But it turns out it's this like beautiful, majestic whale that jumps out of the water and creates a wave that knocks the boat free. Again, didn't have to do that.
Nope. Sure
Could have
did.
just skated on by.
Yeah.
But it chose to help these animals in need. So we reach the end of the film, and the flood is over. Everything is restored to normal. The animals get out of the boat. Everybody's reunited.
And the water really recedes.
Oh yeah, it's gone. I mean,
Massively.
the flood is gone. There's no water to be seen, really.
Yeah.
And the animals come around the corner, and there's the whale lying on its own in the forest
Yep.
and suffocating
Yep.
because of the lack of water.
Yep.
The animals, you could tell, took a beat. They looked at one another. Is there anything we can do? But because of their obvious size differences, they all know that there's nothing. What are they going to do? They're not going to carry the whale back to the ocean.
Right.
So,
Right.
it's really helpless. And so this was my favorite part of the film. The final shot that we have is the animals staring down into this small puddle of water at their reflections, realizing that the thing that they needed to disappear for them to thrive was also the very thing that the whale needed to thrive.
Agreed. Yeah.
Oh, it was heartbreaking.
It was heartbreaking.
It was tough to see that poor whale helpless and in agony.
Yeah, particularly after what it had done, and it was going to be a slow death, and they were all just looking at each other. What can we do? It also echoed the cat looking at its reflection at the beginning of the movie,
100%.
which I thought
It sees itself differently now.
It absolutely
changed.
And to look in the reflection with the animals next to it, so it wasn't just the solitary cat looking at itself anymore. It was all of us looking at ourselves.
Right. And that's why
Wow.
it's so brilliant that the cat was chosen as the sort of protagonist or lead character in this film, because cats are solitary animals.
Very solitary. Exactly. As are those birds were collective, but they had that in them as well.
Sure.
I felt like there was something kindred about them. But anyway, I agree with you completely. I think to take an animal that by nature is just fine by itself and force it to be in a boat and in situations with other animals, and to watch it get to the point where it will swim, it will get food for others, it will like become part of that collective in a fantastic way. I mean, it contributed a huge part in saving the what's the animal called that it saved?
The capybara.
Capybara.
Yeah. Magnificent.
Yeah.
And
beautiful.
It's worth noting too, back to kind of what your point was, there were times in the film where we saw the cat was not friendly at first.
Very true.
When certain animals came on board or they was approached.
Yeah.
I mean, it was those survival instincts were kicking in. I mean,
for sure.
Hiss, swat at, get away from me.
It's funny with the capybara because it couldn't be bothered.
That was my favorite character because it just kind of waddled around and flopped over,
dropped down to take a nap.
Cat's
like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
That was great.
It was really good. And
so many great moments.
Back to the whale here, it's not only it helped in that moment when they had the boat stuck, but it helped the cat survive too.
Yeah, it did.
The cat was drowning.
And it came up, it brought it up to the surface.
Brought it back up to the
surface. The cat had passed out. Yeah.
The cat was by all means dead.
Yeah.
And then
the whale
completely saved its life. So that makes it hit a little bit more. It makes you
oh, for sure.
Punches you in the gut just a little bit more. And this scene, knowing that there's nothing that you can do that's going to make a difference is just a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah,
it just really is. You just feel helpless, And
it was such a quiet, somber scene. It's not like the whale was thrashing or anything. It was just
very gentle.
It was just looking.
Yeah,
just looking.
Yeah,
yeah. It was
the whale had helped them, and they can't do the same in return. So, God, that's just gut wrenching.
Yeah,
and to me, this scene in particular. It really highlights how cruel nature can be sometimes.
Yeah.
Look, it's a lot of it's not glamorous.
No.
Animals hunt and kill others to survive. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's the animal kingdom. It's the hierarchy.
Which so is it cruel or is it just because look, for most animals are food to other animals.
Yeah.
It's
just the way things are.
It's just the way things are. I mean, how hummingbirds have to nest in places where they're going to be around birds that might naturally protect them because they're so small, they're so susceptible, particularly when they're sleeping.
Yeah.
Their lives are in jeopardy every night, as is the case for so many animals out there.
Yeah.
And I guess we just got to see that kind of vulnerability here.
Definitely. I mean, the land animals are dead at sea.
Yeah.
And the sea animals are
right.
dead on land.
That's right.
Only the strong survive. Evolution by natural selection. The very mechanism by which the natural world operates proves this to be so. And we really see that kind of play out in this film. But a beautiful note of, see, my brain wants to go to humanity. My brain reaches for that.
Sure.
But these are animals.
That's what we know.
Yeah. That's what we know as humans. Like if we saw this story similarly with human characters, we'd say, oh, the humanity. It's a story of humanity. But here it's animals. And so it transcends. It's just beings. It's no longer just specifically to humans, which I thought was just, it was just a beautiful film.
I completely agree. Before we move on to the next thing, can I just ask you about a particular scene and maybe get your take?
I would love that.
There was kind of like almost not a pyramid structure, but a really tall structure.
Yeah.
And you could tell at the top that there were probably humans that worshipped there at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the cat runs all the way to the top of this, gets off the boat, and the bird is there.
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, I remember this scene.
And for lack of a better way to put it, the bird ascends.
Right. Transcends. Yeah.
It's like the heavens open up, and the cat also floats up with
Tries
the bird
tries to go up with it.
and can't. And
Yeah.
the bird is taken, if you will.
What do you think that meant? Was that it's not the cat's time yet?
It wasn't the cat's time. I thought that was such a beautiful scene.
Yeah.
I did my best to keep my mind quiet. I just thought, I just want to watch this and enjoy it. Because how it started too was like bubbles coming out of the earth.
Yeah. It's very
And it's like,
majestic.
what's going on here?
Yeah. Very moving.
I thought that was really, really beautifully done.
Sure. Agreed.
And it was a bit of a look. The whole thing is not real, if you will.
Sure.
But that was truly a departure, even within the realm of this unreal situation.
Yeah.
That we're in. To have like the heavens light up and bring this bird up, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
The light
It's not
goes
there anymore.
away from the sky, and the bird is gone.
And it's just the cat there by itself.
Yeah. So I thought that was incredibly moving. And
Agreed.
I think it made me appreciate all the more that there was no dialogue.
Yeah. There was no need.
We're just going to have this event.
Say it with the
Yeah. And the
with the
cat
visuals.
the cat will witness this. And obviously it's something it will never be able to relate to another living being.
Right.
It's just for the cat.
Yeah. And that bird had I guess I interpreted it as the bird had done its job. The bird had gotten him there.
Yeah.
The bird was the one that was steering the boat. We saw like
bird
whenever
did
anything
steer the
else
boat.
took a chance to steer the boat, it was a disaster.
Very true.
So the bird was kind of leading the pack there and kind of taking control.
With one exception, the bird did not want to get the dogs.
Oh, yeah.
With one exception.
Yeah. Maybe it was trying to be smart here. These dogs are going to eat us out of house and home, and boy, did
For
they.
sure. Oh, that is
One of
quite
them
true. But that bird wanted to be it wanted to steer, man.
Oh yeah,
It liked being captain.
Yes, it did.
No doubt.
Yeah, and it got them there. It allowed all of those animals to survive.
It did.
And yeah, I guess it had done its job. And to me, yeah, it was very moving. It was very, very peaceful, very somber.
It was very somber. And you mentioned early on in the introduction the score of this movie.
Oh,
There are times when music can enhance, and there are times when it distracts. And I've seen movies where the score absolutely ruined the movie for me.
interesting. Yeah.
And to me, this felt pitch perfect, if you will. It felt absolutely spot on.
Yeah, agreed.
And
Speaking
during
of
that scene, in particular, I just thought the tone that the score sets.
You're
I
right.
I have mad respect for those who made this film.
That's a good point. Didn't
Mad
distract,
respect.
it enhanced.
It did.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So why don't we give these people some recommendations, huh?
Why don't you do it?
Why don't I do it? You're
Yeah,
right.
go for
So
it.
if you liked the movie Flow and you want to see more movies like it, here's 5 that you can watch right now. The Wild Robot.
Right
I mean, this
on.
is more relevant to this theme than I can even imagine. The 2024 film starring Lupita Nyong'o, and you can watch that on Peacock. The Iron Giant, the 1999 film starring Jennifer Aniston, and that's on Prime. Wall-E, the 2008 film starring Ben Burt. You can watch that on Disney+. Robot Dreams, the 2023 film starring Ivan Lebanda, and that's on Hulu. And, I mean,
Come on.
the OG,
Yeah.
E.T. the Extraterrestrial,
Yeah,
1982 film starring Henry Thomas, and you can watch that on Prime. So what did we learn from watching the movie Flow, Joe? Flow, Joe. That there are just certain breeds of dogs that are nicer than others. That's really it.
That's all I took away.
That's all I took away. You know, give me
Yeah,
a golden.
give me a
lab,
golden,
man.
exactly,
Oh, that's gonna
exactly.
hold the fort down.
Yeah.
What we really learned is that despite our differences, despite the way we've been programmed to think and feel, we can overcome these obstacles to help one another when times get tough. That despite the way we might look, sound, or act differently than one another, At the end of the day, we're all just beings that are sharing this planet called Earth, and we should look out for one another. Because if all of us can't thrive, then nobody should. Thank you so much for joining us today, and remember, as always, you're the main character in your own life. So don't be afraid to take a step back and take a look at the bigger picture, because sometimes the answers that you've been looking for are like just beyond the frame. We'll see you next time.
Peace.
Peace.